Welcome to another episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino with me, and now we're joined by Kyle Yeomans, who does a great job covering the Dallas Cowboys for DallasCowboys.com. And Kyle, are you doing the preseason games on TV again or on the radio?
I will be on the preseason broadcast, pregame shows, sideline, possibly some play-by-play, but I'll be around for some of those preseason
That
matchups
is
for sure.
That's awesome. And obviously, Kyle hosts a ton of the Cowboys podcast. He does basically what I do here for the Giants. He's real locked into the team. So really excited to kind of get his feel on what's going on with the Cowboys. And boy, Kyle, a lot to talk about. So let's start big picture wise, coaching. What do we expect to see from Brian Schottenheimer this year, and what he's going to bring as a head coach, and also keeping the play caller duties at the same time?
Yeah, I'll start with what he'll bring as a head coach, and that's energy. You're going to see a lot of energy from Brian Schottenheimer, whether it's winning or losing. It's going to still have some level of atmosphere and culture to it. That was his number one key throughout the offseason, is he wants to shift the culture here in Dallas to become a more positive environment, a more building environment. And then, of course, hopefully that turns into winning some football games. And it's different than Mike McCarthy, a complete 180 at times. Not to say Mike McCarthy was not a player's coach. He definitely took care of his players. He took care of his staff, but he did it with kind of a different energy and a different mindset that Brian Schottenheimer is ultimately going to bring. Now, when it comes to X's and O's, it's going to be interesting because I know not New York Giants fans, but New York Jets fans have known Brian Schottenheimer for a little bit of time. Of course, up in Seattle, he called plays as an offensive coordinator under Pete Carroll for a bit. He hasn't called plays in Dallas yet. And so it's going to be a feeling out process early. I think we'll see a lot of motions early on in these formations, and pre-snap looks are going to look different than what they did with Mike McCarthy. But when it comes to play calling, it's kind of all up in the air now for Brian Schottenheimer. He's got a great staff underneath him. A lot of people around here and around the NFL have very much so been excited about what Schottenheimer has added from a staff and a coaching standpoint. It's just whether or not it's going to turn into success when it comes to play calling on the field as well.
Kyle, we should probably keep it with the staff since you just brought up that topic. And Matt Eberflus is now the defensive coordinator. And we know of his reputation. We know of what he's done in that role before. It didn't work out great as a head coach in Chicago. But what does he want to do to tinker with this defensive unit?
He wants to rebuild the success of the front seven, and it starts with his linebackers, and they've made a couple of additions throughout the offseason. Guys like Kenneth Murray Jr., they traded for him, made a quick swap of draft picks and draft capital to bring him here from Tennessee after he had 100-plus tackles 2 years ago with the Titans. He brings in a guy like Jack Sanborn, who played with him in Chicago, and then he adds, of course, the talent of DeMarvion Overshown, who should be ready about midway through this regular season, and then the recent additions of guys like Damone Clark and things of the sort at the linebacker position. So I think he wants to rebuild what the front seven was when he was the linebackers coach in Dallas. Of course, with Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer over these last 4 seasons combined between the two as a defensive coordinator, it's been all about the edge rushers and possibly trying to turn it into turnovers, especially on the secondary side of things. So I think it takes that outside in mentality, and now it changes it to an inside out mentality for Matt Eberflus, which is a little bit different than what we've seen with Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer. But expect a lot more out of the three technique guys like Osa Odighizuwa, who was re-signed to a 4-year contract extension this offseason. He's going to have a huge part in this defense. And then those linebackers that I mentioned, that's a big key for Eberflus to turn things around in a place that he's comfortable with. And remember, he was a linebackers coach here under Jason Garrett for a couple of years, has been on this staff before. Now he returns as the defensive coordinator, and he's already off to a good start throughout the offseason.
Well, Kyle, I think we know what Dak Prescott is. He's looks healthy, and I'm not even going to ask you about him because I think he's a given. But we know, and I'm sure you're happy about that because I'm sure you're tired of the Dak Prescott.
You're the first one ever to say I'm not going to ask about Dak Prescott, period.
But I do think his performance is very much impacted by what's going on around him, and that's like that for all quarterbacks. But I think he especially. So I want to start at the offensive line first. And for the first time, we do an exercise every year where we rank each position group in the NFC East team by team. And for the first time in my memory, I think I might have had the Cowboys offensive line as the third or fourth best group in the division. And that's
Yeah.
not something we're used to doing. They're usually one or two with the Eagles, right? It's young. They have a bunch of guys that I like coming out of these drafts that are young and talented. How'd you see it start coming together? Should we expect the jump from Tyler Guyton in year two? How does Tyler Booker look early? Is Terrence Steele going to continue to get better another year off that ACL? Just tell me what's going on with this offensive line group.
No, and I think you're right to rank them third or fourth at the moment because there is a lot of unproven, but that unproven side is because of the youth. You've got a second-year center. You've got a guy in Tyler Smith who's really the core of your offensive line, who's been incredible since he was drafted back in 2022. That's solidified. Everything else is kind of a question. A rookie at right guard. Terrence Steele hasn't looked the same at right tackle as of late, even though he's the veteran of the group. He may be the biggest question on that offensive line at the moment. And then, of course, a second year first round pick in Tyler Guyton on the other side that you don't really have a whole lot of backbone to send to or to send film to for what he did as a rookie. So I really do think there's a lot of unproven. Now that youth can turn into something. And I think there's a lot of hope around that youth and how that talent will piece together. I'll start with the tackles because I'm very confident in Tyler Booker. I think he looks great so far. We haven't put pads on yet, but he's checked every box to this point. I think he's going to be about as ready as any rookie to play a starting offensive line role for 17 games as you possibly could be going from Alabama to the NFL. He certainly has everything that it takes to be there. I have no questions about Cooper Beebe at center. And then I just mentioned just how much I love seeing Tyler Smith healthy in at guard. As long as those three stay healthy, Dallas is very confident in the interior, which is a good thing in this division with as much talent on the defensive tackle side that Philadelphia has, that Washington has. And then, of course, you guys know what the Giants bring to the table at defensive tackle as well. But these tackles outside are the questions. Terrence Steele, veteran guy. I think this coaching staff, guys like Clayton Adams, who was an offensive line guru at Arizona, one of the best up-and-coming coaches in the NFL, a huge offensive line background, especially when trying to develop tackles. He's going to have a huge impact on Terrence Steele as the offensive coordinator in Dallas. Then he's got Connor Riley to also help things out. I think this scheme that Brian Schottenheimer will bring to the table is going to benefit Terrence Steele, maybe more than any other returning member of the starting 11 on offense for this Cowboys team. I think Steele is going to benefit. On the other side for Tyler Guyton, it's all about staying healthy and remaining durable throughout the season. He was in and out of the lineup in training camp that transitioned into the regular season. He was in and out of the lineup there. And even when he was in the lineup, it was spotty play and inconsistencies where there were flashes of greatness and why the Cowboys took him in the first round at the 29th overall pick in 2024. It didn't necessarily piece together the way that they wanted it to. He's changed his diet. He's changed his workout regimen. He's changed his routine this offseason. He looks fantastic going into training camp. Maybe if I had a list of top three guys that are looking the best compared to what they did in 24, he would be at the top of that list. Wow. He looks incredible. So I think you're going to see a jump from Tyler Guyton. There's a lot of fundamental and technical aspects of his game that still have to take a step forward. But I think Guyton will be better, and I think Steele will be better. I agree with you ranking them third right now, but it wouldn't shock me by the end of the year if they sneak up into the number 2 spot and then start knocking on the door for the next couple years to come for the number 1 spot.
Well, Kyle, if the offensive line is a wait-and-see proposition this year, the way you have described it, it seems to me there's no doubt that the Achilles is that running core that did not do very well last season. Now, Javonte Williams has come in. Miles Sanders has come in. Those guys have done some things on their resume. But are we looking at a backfield by committee with Dallas, trying to get the most they can out of those guys and a couple of young, unproven fellas? Or are they really hoping that a guy like Sanders can suddenly become another 1,000-yard back like he was in Philly a couple of years ago?
I think you answered it right there. I think it's a couple of veterans and a couple of rookies. You've got Phil Maffa and Jaden Blue that the Cowboys drafted on day 3 of this year's NFL draft. Those are the 2 rookies. The 2 veterans, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. It's going to be those 4 guys battling it out going into training camp. Nobody is safe. Nobody has promised anything. So they hope that somebody will emerge out of that group. Will they emerge? I don't see it. I see this as a running back by committee and a very true approach to it. I'm concerned about the run game because they weren't able to run the ball effectively last year. Rico Dowdle eclipsed 1,000 yards, but even at times he struggled in short yardage situations. He had a couple fumbles in big time moments. There were problems with this run game last year. Part of that stemmed from the offensive line rotation, some of the injuries up front. But I don't necessarily have any more confidence in the running back group this year than I did at any point last year either. And I think they, if anything, took a step back this offseason when it came to running the football. So for me, it's will one of these rookies elevate enough, or will one of these veterans take over a bell cow 2 or 3 down back role? I don't see it from anybody other than Javonte Williams. He's the guy that I think would, if he had the best shot, or out of those 4 guys, he has the best shot to take a step forward. I think Williams has done it in Denver. He's carried a workload like that before throughout his NFL career. And he's still young enough to where you can still have something left in the tank to carry an offense and a ground game throughout the year. But I think as the year goes on, you're going to see guys like Jaden Blue, who has a home run hitting type of ability. He's just not ready to take on that workload quite yet. Coming from Texas, he showed it at times, the acceleration, the speed, the closing end of it. He's got all of those elements to it. He needs to take a step forward in pass protection. He needs to take a step forward as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And then we might be able to see Blue more and more as the year goes along. But I think it's Williams followed by a group of guys, and they're going to have to mix and match where they see fit.
Last one for me on the offense, Kyle. George Pickens, how do they think he's going to open up this offense, having a deep threat across from CeeDee Lamb? And do they think they can manage his personality and maybe some of the immaturity to the point where he could be a long-term solution across from Lamb for a long period of time?
I think that's the goal, at least at the moment. You look at him going into a rookie contract, and I think Pickens has no choice but to come in and have a positive mindset. And it seems like that at the moment. The conversations I've had with him, the conversations within the building, the way that he's connected with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, all of these things look great. But as the season goes on and it gets into the wear and tear of a campaign, we've seen what happened during his time in Pittsburgh. He can't afford to do that in Dallas, because a black mark on your resume at some point through one organization is only one thing. But if he has 2 marks against his resume on his from 2 different organizations, ones that are for the most part respected throughout the NFL, it's going to really hurt his chances to sign a bigger deal going into his second contract in the NFL. So he has a chance to make a lot of money. He has a chance to lose a lot of money. I think he'll be fine from a behavioral standpoint, and he's been nothing but great so far. But again, we're not playing games yet. They're not losing games yet. He's not having targets taken away from him at any point yet. All of those things have yet to come to fruition. From an X's and O's standpoint, I think he fits perfectly with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee's that, and you guys have seen CeeDee twice a year for the last 5 years now. The fact that he can get underneath the defense, the yards after the catch, he can have some contested ball catch ability, but really that's not his game. They want to get him in space and they want to allow him in his athleticism to take over. Whereas George Pickens is quite the opposite. Go up and get it. Go and outrun a guy. Go deep downfield and catch the seam, catch those deep verticals. There's a lot of things that George Pickens can do that CeeDee Lamb can't do, and vice versa. And I think that's where the marriage is going to actually work out. And it gives Dak Prescott probably the best pass catching core, at least guys that are in their prime, that are consistent in what they do. It gives Dak Prescott a real big confidence boost for who he's throwing the football to.
Kyle, let's flip it to defense. And on behalf of Giants fans everywhere, thank you for allowing DeMarcus Lawrence to go to Seattle. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. Dante Fowler comes back, a guy who has been up and down throughout his career. Mm-hmm. How important is his pass rush going to be? Because besides Parsons, losing Lawrence is a big bite out of what they've done in the past, getting to the quarterback.
Yeah, Paul, I love that. D-Law always had some success against the Giants, and then you bring in a guy like Dante Fowler Jr., who had success as a Cowboy and as a Commander. So still something to keep an eye on. I think Fowler is crucial for the development and the depth of this edge rusher group. There's a lot of guys they really like that either haven't developed yet or are young enough to where they still see them developing in the future. Most notably, Sam Williams and Donovan Ezraku. Ezraku was a second round draft pick this offseason, and then Sam Williams was a former second round pick who just hasn't clicked yet on this edge rusher staff. I think Dante Fowler Jr. brings a mentor element now that he's away from Dan Quinn. He can kind of do his own thing again. He had a great double-digit sack season last year. If he's able to piece together, it doesn't even have to be double-digit sacks. It can be 6, 7 sacks and pressures throughout the year. That's going to open up things for Micah Parsons on the opposite side. It's going to open up things for Donovan Ezraku, who can learn from him. He's already been very complimentary, Ezraku has, of the leadership ability of Fowler and some of these other veterans in the edge rusher group. So I think bringing back Dante Fowler was really an underrated signing from Dallas this offseason in the free agent market. Cowboys fans just kind of know him as the rotational edge rusher that we've seen here in the past. He's kind of turned more into or turned into more than that over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I think we saw that at the Washington Commanders side of things last year when he had double-digit sacks with Dan Quinn out there.
And then you have Marshawn Nealon, too, their second round pick last year. I know they have high hopes.
Another
for.
one, yeah.
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 I'll let Paul ask one more about the secondary real quick. We only got about 3 minutes to go here, Kyle. It wouldn't be a Cowboys offseason without questions about a big money contract from one of their superstars. Should we just expect this Micah Parsons things to go exactly like all these other ones have gone? So we're sitting here on what, August 23rd, and we hear about him becoming the highest paid edge rusher in football. Is that how this is going to go?
Yeah, I really think it's getting closer and closer to that. And it's funny because I can compare him to all those other big money contracts that we've seen in the past. Is this going to be Zach Martin, where he's holding out multiple weeks in the camp, shows up halfway through, and then he's good and he's ramped up for the season? Is it going to be CeeDee Lamb, where it goes right up until the end of camp and he's not around, he's nowhere near, and then, oh, here he is, and he's the highest paid pass catcher in football? Is it going to be a Trayvon Diggs, where we get to Oxnard, California, get ready for training camp, and he sits down and signs in the hotel room before the first practice even happens? I tend to trend toward Trayvon. I am optimistic that it does get done before training camp practice. Micah wants to be out there. His party wants him to be out there. His coaches want him to be out there. The front office, of course, would love to get a deal done. They just haven't done so yet. So you're right. It's par for the course. We've seen it every year, it feels like, in Dallas. A big money contract coming down to the wire. I tend to think the framework is somewhat in place, and I think a deal will be done sooner rather than later. It may take a practice or two, but I still think it's trending toward the earlier part of training camp, in my opinion. I've been wrong before. This is not reporting anything that hasn't been reported already, but it is something that I see going into the training camp regimen. I think just all of the elements play together. I think he'll be out there in a couple practices for sure.
All right, to put a bow tie on this, Kyle, a lot of familiar names out there in the secondary. You already mentioned Diggs just a few moments ago. There's a perception that it's been a feast or famine gambling type secondary for the last several years. And when they get those turnovers, it's a huge plus. What is Eberflus going to ask from this secondary? Does he want them to be more steady and conservative?
I think he does. I think we're going to see less of the risk and more of the coverage than we've seen in the past. Because you're right, DaRon Bland, Trayvon Diggs, they both had tremendous seasons, and it's helped blow up their career in a good way through their time here in Dallas. But it's also helped blow up some coverages at times as well throughout the big play elements, the run game. I mean, all of these things are expected to change, I think, with Eberflus. Like I said earlier, that inside-out approach. He wants to be steady and aggressive, rushing from the interior, rushing from the linebacker core, being steady as a linebacker core and steady as a secondary. And that's going to help the safeties out a lot. Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson both return. I think you're going to see Trayvon Diggs play more in coverage, better in coverage than he has in the past, because he's not going to be looking for those interceptions the same way that he has in the past. Now, doesn't mean that they won't come along those. I think Trayvon Diggs has a nose for the football. Same thing with DaRon Bland. I still think they'll come across their interceptions and their big-time plays, but I don't think they'll be seeking them out the same way that they did under Dan Quinn and under Mike Zimmer at times last year as well.
When do you expect to see Diggs back on the field real quick?
I think it'll be closer to week 1, 2, or 3. It's going to be that first month of the regular
Oh,
season.
wow.
I don't think they're going to put him on reserve pup. I think he'll be on the active pup throughout training camp, so that way he can work on bands and be around it. And then once we get closer to the season, that's when they're going to have to make a choice one way or the other, because it hasn't even been a full 10 months since the injury was sustained. I think there's a good chance he'll probably be either very limited or non-existent at training camp on the field, but he'll be involved in the meetings and be able to play within the first couple weeks of the regular
He
season.
he didn't re-tear the ACL, right? Was
No,
that a meniscus?
no,
What was that?
it was, or oh yes, it was. I think it was a torn ACL. It's been a long time
Oh,
since I
another
covered
one,
that,
huh?
10
Wow.
months.
Okay.
So yeah, he's consistently been in the rehab process. He's been around the building a little bit, but not a super. Remember, it took a little bit longer the first time for
Yeah.
him to come back too. So it's a little bit longer this time around, I think, just because it's another one and another thing to deal with.
Kyle, good stuff, my friend. Anything you want to plug before we let you go?
No, I think you guys do a great job as well. I mean, we've got our Cowboys content on DallasCowboys.com, Cowboys Now app. I know the listenership from New York Giants country probably won't be super interested in that unless they're looking behind enemy lines at certain points. But if you ever want to, come on by. We welcome anybody to come and watch some Cowboys
I
coverage.
always joke the only people that do more podcasts than we do are the Cowboys. So we're happy to have you.
Yeah, it's true.
I appreciate the
That's,
time, Kyle. Thanks
I
so much.
Thanks,
appreciate it,
Kyle.
John. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me, guys.
We thank Kyle Yeomans for joining us right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. We're here in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. And now we welcome in Ryan Fowler, who does a great job covering the Washington Commanders, has a podcast. Ryan, tell us where everybody can find your great work covering the team in our nation's capital.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you don't follow me there already on X, _ Ryan Fowler. And my podcast, as John mentioned, is Commanding the Huddle. And that is on all podcast platforms.
All right, so let's start with kind of the news of the day here, or news of yesterday, maybe. This is airing on Thursday. What's going on with Terry McLaurin?
Yeah, look, it's unfortunate, guys. Bottom line, what's going on with Terry McLaurin as far as who the individual is off the field, that is Terry. You know, the leader that he has been for a long time and what he was in the prior regime with obviously under Dan Snyder, which was a complete mess out there in Washington. But you finally get the young man a quarterback. You know, he breaks a single season record last year for touchdowns at the wideout position. And now he has no contract. And now it's threatening kind of, is he going to be here in 2025? Is he someone that's going to potentially sit out in camp? I do think, guys, it does get done. Is that in the next few days? I don't think so. I think potentially moving the first day or 2 or 3 of camp, and Terry McLaurin is just not out there. Now, I will say this, he is the type of individual that doesn't want to sit back and not be out there with his teammates. He wants to consistently work, and he wants to consistently build on what they had last year, on what he's been for this organization for a long, long time. And eventually, hopefully, this organization hopes, you know, they can retire his number 17 up there in the rafters someday. But I do think it gets done. I just don't know if it's going to be the next 2 or 3 days. But it is an unfortunate situation considering Washington obviously finally found their quarterback and the number 1 receiver to go with it.
You know what, Ryan? I get that McLaurin is a superstar and Deebo Samuel is a superstar player as well, but they're totally different styles of player. And so if McLaurin does wind up not playing in that first game against the Giants, we all know that's the season opener. What are we looking at in this receiver core? Because it seems to me that after Deebo Samuel, who they just got from San Francisco, the rest of that depth chart is very sketchy.
Yeah, Paul, it's a great point. You know, they drafted Luke McCaffrey last year for a reason. They're hoping he takes a step this year. And they also drafted a similar-ish type of player to Deebo Samuel in Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech this year as well. So they're hoping those 2 young players can take a step if Terry won't be out there. But I'm right there with you because Noah Brown has had issues all of OTAs. Michael Gallup is still injured. They're trying to pull some strings out of him if he could be a wide receiver 4 or 5 for this roster. And very quickly, Deebo Samuel's your wide receiver 1, but they wanted him to be in that kind of that Z type of player on this offense where he's in the backfield, he's in the slot, he's in pre-snap motion. He's going to be that versatile type of piece where he's even going to help the running game a little bit because the run game, bottom line, I don't know if they made enough additions at the running back room. I know Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the 7th rounder, is going to be a story of the offseason. But out wide, if you have no Terry McLaurin, you're looking at the KJ Osborns, Noah Browns, and some of the guys I mentioned, the young pieces, to really step up in this group. But I will say this, guys, with Jaden Daniels under center and the guys he made it work with last year, like De'Ami Brown, Alameda Zaccheaus, and Zach Ertz, who's still pulling strings out of his career, you're going to have a chance when he's under center, and he proved that all year last year.
You know, Ryan, when we did a bunch of preview stuff with you last year, you were much more positive about this Commanders team than most anyone else on the national landscape, and you hit it. I don't think you thought they would be going to the NFC Championship game, but they played really, really well, and a lot of that had to do with the quarterback. You mentioned Jaden Daniels. So take me through his rookie year. Why was he able to have so much success so early, and what do you think are the danger points here that you need to keep an eye on so he doesn't have a letdown second year the way C.J. Stroud did after having a similar rookie year the way Jaden Daniels had?
Yeah, I think one thing that's great, and I credit Adam Peters for this, obviously the GM in Washington, is boosting up that front five. You bring in Laramie Tunsil, you spend high capital on Josh Connerly. Brandon Coleman slides in a natural spot at guard. So you're building up the front five to battle the guys like Dexter Lawrence and the guys you guys have in New York and obviously Philly, and of course Micah Parsons down there in Dallas. But when you look at what Jaden Daniels did so well last year, really the first 2-3 weeks of the season, even if you watch the first week against Tampa Bay, everything was very horizontal, and the training wheels were really on this offense. But Cliff Kingsbury looked at this young man and say, look, we got to let this kid just put the training wheels off and just let him go. Take the reins of this offense, whether he needs to win with his arm or he needs to win with his legs. And that's what made him so darn special. And I think the biggest thing for me is if you're a quarterback that's so young and you can win inside the pocket to where you can win between the ears before you ever have to showcase that 4.3, 4.4 speed that he has on the outside, or expand the pocket a little bit and then make sandlot plays downfield, which he obviously did so well last year, and why he's getting these comparisons now to the Josh Allens and Lamar Jacksons of the world outside the pocket. But really, he just got better and better and better as the season went on. It didn't matter who in the world was on the outside, and now taking that next step, because I think the biggest thing, guys, this year is Jaden Daniels, this entire Commanders roster, they are not sneaking up on anybody. They don't have a single 1 o'clock game in October or November. That is a national type of schedule. The NFL saying, look,
wow,
Washington, we want you guys, this is your platform. Showcase yourself to be, are you going to be an elite team for the next 10 years? Or was 2024 more of a flash in the pan? Obviously, Dan Quinn and company hopes that it's continuing here in 2025 and beyond.
Let's go to that running game you alluded to a little while ago and then kind of glossed it over. And Ryan, I think it's significant because to me, Eckler looked like he started to get old last season. Robinson, to me, is not a bell cow back. He's got to be part of a committee situation. And I'm not sure what McNichols is.
Yeah, and Chris Rodriguez is still there too. They're hoping to he can be a guy that's maybe a third down back. Look, guys, I think that they were supposed to be a team that in the first day, maybe it was in Marion Hampton, or they really liked an RJ Harvey or Caleb Johnson. They didn't go that route, obviously. And I'm right there with you. I do not think Brian Robinson is a bell cow. Jeremy McNichols is a guy that's bounced around the league a little bit and had some sparks last year, more so because Jaden got the attention as a guy with his legs. They need somebody in the backfield, bottom line, that can take the pressure off of Jaden Daniels under center and create his own holes inside the tackles or outside the tackles. Because all teams in football, if you throw it really well, at some point, you're going to have to run the football, especially as you guys know in the NFC East, when it starts getting colder a little bit when we get to December and January. You're going to have to run the football. So I think right now, I hate to say this for other Commanders, people that are watching this out there, but Jacory Krosky-Merritt, the 7th rounder out of Arizona that didn't even play for the Wildcats last year because of a waiver issue, he is, bottom line, their fundamentally most talented runner on the roster. And I would not be shocked if he makes the roster this year, is not just wearing a jersey, but also has an impact.
He was the best running back down at the Shrine Game this year. I believe he had a classification issue at Arizona. Was that his issue, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, it was similar, Paul, to what we had with Turbo here, where he kind of went there. Yeah. They thought he had a year left, and he didn't, and he couldn't play. But yeah, he was fast. He was very impressive down at the Shrine Bowl. All right, final one on the offense here, Ryan, before we go to the defense, where I think we have some more questions than answers. If there's something this year, and this is similar to what I asked about Daniel specifically, that could cause his offense to take a step back compared to what it did last year, what would you be keeping an eye on that maybe has you a little bit concerned when you take a look at this group in a whole heading into year 2 with Quinn, Jaden Daniels, and of course, Cliff Kingsbury?
Yeah, guys, I think it's the interior of this offensive line. You're bringing in Coleman from left tackle to left guard. You're switching Andrew Wiley from right tackle to right guard before Sam Cosmi comes back from injury. They're hoping he's healthy. From what I've heard, his timeline is getting a little bit accelerated, but he is going to likely miss the first 6 to 8 weeks potentially of this 2025
Wow.
NFL campaign.
Okay.
So as of right now, this run game in the middle, trying to create holes in those 1, 2, 3, 4 holes up the middle where you got to be able to create creases against the Dexter Lawrences, Jalen Carters of the world. It's not going to be easy. And it's sitting back there and dropping back 40 times a game. You're trying to keep your Lamborghini, if you will, under center Jaden Daniels, staring at the defense, not staring up at the clouds on his backside. So I think if anything that's going to limit this offense this year for potentially being a top 2 or 3 offense this year and reaching their potential is going to be the ground game and trying to put everything on number 5 under center.
They wound up getting a double-digit sack year out of Dante Fowler last season, Ryan, as you're well aware, but now he's back in Dallas. Where's the bulk of this pass rush coming from?
Their best pass rusher on this roster, guys, is inside linebacker Frankie Luvu. That's their best pass rusher, and that's a major, major concern. I thought they were going to go there early on day 2 to grab a potential player in the deep class that this was. And look, Dallas got a heck of a player in Donovan Ezra, who obviously know the names in Philadelphia, and you guys know who in the world Abdul Carter is and the players you guys have rushing off the edge. But this group right now, Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell has been a guy that's been 2 years away from being 2 years away since he came out of Clemson years ago as a first rounder for Vegas out there. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a second-year player. I'm reaching for names here. A lot of guys listening to this don't know who those guys are, and that's okay because Frankie Luvu is the best pass rusher. Now, with that, Jordan McGee, second-year player from Temple that really didn't see too much in his rookie season. He's going to be asked to play alongside Bobby Wagner a lot and allow Frankie to get down near the line of scrimmage. But they're going to ask a lot of him, and their pass rush is going to rely on the interior this year. Daron Payne and Johnny Newton are going to be their guys that are going to be asked to really start this thing from the interior, and guys on the outside, specifically Dorrance Armstrong, are going to have to step up this year. It's going to be a long, long day for this defense.
Yeah, Ryan, I've got to be honest with you. I'm a little confused with the way Washington went about their offseason. I understand you want to build around your star quarterback, so I get that part of the theory, right? That makes sense. But to me, the weakness of this team and the reason you guys lost to the Eagles in the NFC title game was that your defense couldn't stop anyone. And talent-wise, I thought it was deficient. And I don't think it got that much better from a talent perspective over the course of the offseason. I know you had a Marshawn Lattimore late last year. He has all sorts of injury issues. Who knows how much he can stay on the field? Where do you think this defense, if anywhere, has the potential being much better this year than it was last year?
Yeah, there's 2 major questions. It's really in the secondary. You just mentioned Marshawn Lattimore. They brought him in from New Orleans to stop, the Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smiths of the world. And bottom line, guys, you guys watch the same tape I did. It flat out was not good enough for Marshawn Lattimore. And for myself heading into this year, I cannot sit here and say Marshawn Lattimore looks like a top 10, 15, top 20 corner.
I mean, he got benched, right, in the playoff game against Philly?
Yeah, the first half against Tampa Bay, against Mike Evans, was absolutely abysmal from Marshawn. So they drafted Trey Amos early on day 2 from Ole Miss. They're expecting him to be a guy that potentially is their CB1, but very quickly, guys, if Marshawn Lattimore doesn't play up to expectation, you're once again asking Mikey Sanders, still had a heck of a rookie year, to bump to the outside. And then you have Jonathan Jones, Noah Igbenogany as your CB3, CB4. Where do they play? And very quickly, it can get bad, especially as we just talked about, if you're not able to get after the passer. And I love Bobby Wagner. I think we all do. One of the best to ever do it in the middle. But he's not 25 years old anymore, and he's not 30 years old anymore. So there is a deficiency in talent, and they have to get after people because they can't win every single game 55-50.
Well, that's the other question I wanted to ask you, Ryan, because it seems like Bobby Wagner's the new London Fletcher, right? He wants to play forever. I don't know. Is he going to be able to give them another 17-game schedule playing 3 downs? I don't know that that's in the cards.
Yeah, Paul, it's a great question. And I agree with you. The London Fletcher stuff, I think London had a little bit more juice downhill than Bobby does. Not any disrespect to Bobby and what he's done, but he's a throwback type of player, guys, right in the middle of a defense. These modern backers at 225, 30 pounds that can really drop their hips and flip in coverage. Bobby Wagner is see it, diagnose it, and move downhill. And you guys mentioned the Philadelphia game where they got blown out. Everybody, when their father and their mother knew that Saquon Barkley was going to get the ball, and he scored in his first 2 touches in that ball game. That flat out cannot happen. So they have to improve. They have players. I think they've added some depth at certain positions. Javon Kinlaw up front was their biggest free agency addition. They brought a thumper on the back end and Will Harris. It's not a Javon Holland like you guys have in New York, but they have some players that they hope accelerate their timeline as far as performance ceiling, or maybe a long year for Joe Witt's unit.
You just mentioned Javon Kinlaw. You did not mention him when you talked about the pass rushers at defensive tackle with Payne and Newton. And Kinlaw was one of their bigger free agent additions on the defensive side of the ball. Was this your general manager reliving his like San Francisco 49er days? Because I was surprised by the size of the contract, given his relative inability to stay healthy and lack of production early in his NFL career.
Yeah, there's always people out there, right, that say, I can fix this guy. I can fix this guy. There's a reason why Adam Peters is in San Francisco and said, I like Javon Kinlaw and made him a first round pick. Right now, it's either look, they're going to give Javon to have every opportunity to produce alongside Payne and Newton. They're going to have some unique looks up front with 3 down linemen, 2 outside backers standing up outside the tackles. But Javon's going to be a guy that's going to be up and down this front 4. I don't know where he's going to line every single snap, which is great. He's a big, strong, physical, long player, but he's never been that guy to potentially take over a series or two, like they've asked of Daron Payne and the John Allens of years past. So it's a humongous, humongous season for Javon. And it's also a big thing on Adam Peters, because everyone wants to say Adam Peters has done a great job building this roster, and I credit him. However, he's failed in some other things. When you look at Michael Davis bringing him on the defensive side of the ball, the Emmanuel Forbes experiment, trying to extend what he had. So there's some questions here as far as what's going on, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, with where this group's going to go.
I wanted to bring up Daron Payne for a minute because, most of the guys who he played with who were part of a really good defense aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
How is this all going to impact him? He's getting older, and now he's being asked to take on more of that load on the front line, don't you think?
Yeah, he's expected to be, I'm not going to say an all-pro, but I know he's had a great OTA session this offseason. I've heard really good things from him in a contract year for Daron. Maybe he's in the future plans. But when you look at guys that were around him in the future, whether it was John Allen, Fidarian Mathis, they drafted out of Alabama, no longer there. John Ridgeway was a really nice rotational piece, no longer there. So it's really him, and it's Johnny Newton moving into year 2 to where they look at him and say, look, you have to do everything for us up front. You're going to demand double teams, allow guys and the backers to fill downhill, and really do everything up front for us. And you're knocking on wood that he doesn't miss a game or 2 or 3 or 4. And then you're relying on guys like Sheldon Day and Big Eddie Goldman that they brought over from Chicago, who's more of that 1st and 10 run gap clogger, not your modern day 1 and 3 tech that can play all 3 downs. So again, as we speak here, guys, you can see all the questions that we have at all 3 levels, even though all the attention is on the offensive side of the ball. You got to play defense. And at the end of the day, as we know, guys, in sports, defense wins championships, and that's true.
All right, Ryan, final question for me. I like to do like fan base psychoanalysis here. We've seen the Commanders or then Washington football team or prior to that, the Redskins, over the last 25 years, have these kind of 1 years, right? Where they come out, they play really well. Yeah. The fan base gets optimistic, and then next year, everything just, and it disappears.
Yeah.
How is the fan base feeling heading into year 2? Does the new ownership group, new coach, Jaden Daniels, erase all of those mental scars of the last, 2-3 decades? Or is there still something kind of in the bottom of like these Washington fan souls where it's like, I just don't want the shoe to drop. Don't let the shoe drop.
Yeah, the bad taste is still in the mouth of a lot of individuals in the DC area, guys. Because like you said, John, you had the year of Alex Smith and the Kirk Cousins success, RG3 in 2012.
RG3. That's what last year reminded me of, the RG3 year, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. 1 year, right? So now with the success that was 30, 40 years ago with Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon, that's great. But now moving into 2025, where again, I mentioned earlier, you're not sneaking up on anybody. You got new jerseys wearing the alternates this year. You're going to slowly move into really just exercising the history a little bit and showcasing that tradition of this franchise that has been so successful. But this year, is it making it back to an NFC title game? Is that a success? Is that, if you don't make it there, is it a disappointment? I personally don't think so. I think you make it to the playoffs this year because there are still holes there. But John, as you mentioned, I'm so glad you did. Everyone is so caught up in the Jaden Daniels MVP stuff, and Adam Peters is this, and we have Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil protecting Jaden Daniels. But behind the scenes, you take the layers back a little bit, there are holes on this roster, a reason why they really exceeded expectations in 2024. But I will say this, when you have Jaden Daniels under center, he's proved it time and time again last year. I know he's only moving into his 2nd season. You have to see it again. But going into Detroit, going into Tampa Bay, you take back the fumbles against Philadelphia. I know that's hard to do, but you take those back, you give yourself a little bit of a chance. I just think overall there are still holes on this roster that people still need to look at, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, that could limit their ceiling here in 25.
Ryan, finally for me, one more comment. I was only going to say this. There are optimistic Giants fans who point to the fact that the Giants gave Washington 2 very difficult games last year, and that maybe the gap isn't as wide as some people perceive outside this building. Sounds like you might kind of agree with them.
100%, Paul. I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to talk about the Giants roster. I think they have one of the most underrated rosters in all of football, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. No one is talking about the New York Giants and what they have. And the additions that they made specifically, big boy up front and Darius Alexander, Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland on the back end. I love me some Cam Scadaboo. I think he gets this narrative of, oh, just in between the tackles downhill. The guy's vision's outstanding. He'll do everything for you. You have him Malik Neighbors, who hopefully gets healthy sooner rather than later. Russell Wilson, is he the future? No. I like Jackson Dart. There's a lot of talent, guys, on this roster, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, where Abdul Carter, I think, is a future defensive player of the year, paired with the guys you already have. No one is talking about New York. I will as the season gets going because I think they're a team that could surprise some people this year.
Ryan, good stuff, my friend. Once again, tell the folks that they can find all your stuff.
Absolutely. Again, on X, if you don't follow me there already, _Ryan Fowler, and my podcast, Commanding the Huddle, is on all podcast platforms.
That's Ryan Fowler. Thanks so much for joining us, man. Good to see you. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.
Thanks, Ryan.
We thank Ryan Fowler for joining us, and now we turn our attention to the fourth team in the NFC East, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And to preview them, we welcome in friend of the program who covers them for the team site, the one and only Dave Spadaro. Dave, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you, John. Thanks for having me, and let's do it, man. Another season ahead here.
Yeah, whenever I see your handsome face in July, it means training camp's right around the corner, my friend, and it's coming fast and furious. And it's funny, I think back to this conversation we had almost exactly at this same time last year. And I guess I'll use the word. I feel like there was some level of pessimism in our conversation. The Eagles have come off a year where they had frankly collapsed at the very end of the year, changed both their coordinators. The head coach was ostensibly on the hot seat if you talk to certain people in the media in the Philadelphia area. And lo and behold, a year later, you guys are the most talented team in football and you're coming off a Super Bowl. It's funny how things work in the NFL, isn't it?
Yeah, and the word pessimism is a bit strong. It was certainly a lot of questions about the Eagles going into 24 because of the reasons that you outlined, and Jalen Hurts, and what kind of performance would he have coming off the big contract, an up and down year in 23. Eagles again changing their coordinators for 24. Start out the season 2-2, and then you get hot. And there's no greater example of how momentum is so important in the NFL. The Eagles went on to win 16 of their last 17 games, blowing teams out. Young players really stepping up. It was John. This team's been in 3 Super Bowls in the last 8 years, and that team, it was like 17. It was just something really, really special about the Philadelphia Eagles, and they got a couple breaks along the way, including Washington beating Detroit in the playoffs, bringing the NFC Championship game home to Philadelphia. So a dominant football team, but I think, look, we have been around long enough to know that the past is the past. And one thing that's always in the back of your mind is that we have not had a repeat winner in the NFC East since 2003, 2004. And as good as the Eagles look, and certainly as good as they were last year, I'm not sure that means anything heading into 25.
No, everything. It's a year-to-year league. That is absolutely correct, Dave. I'm with you. All right, I'll ask one question about this because I don't want Giant fans to throw tomatoes at me. How did Saquon Barkley transform the Eagles' offense? Go.
Absolutely. Changed the whole dynamic of the offense, and it became a run-based offense. Now, when your running back is breaking off 60-yard touchdown runs at a clip that he did 7 last season, it's a home run threat in the backfield. But there's no question that the offense evolved into defenses came in saying, we've got to stop Saquon Barkley first. That clearly opened up things in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl. Saquon had all the pieces around him. Everybody in New York knows what a talented player he is, what a great performer he is, how prepared he is for the seasons. It was a dream season. And I know as much as it pains New York Giants fans, if you loved Saquon Barkley and, you respect him as a person, there's got to be just a little bit of happiness for what he was able to accomplish, because he still speaks very fondly of his time with the Giants and the fans and the organization. But just everything came together for him perfectly last year.
Yeah, look, he's a good dude. And look, we talked about this last year. I maintain it. He would never have put up a season like he did with the Eagles last year if he had stayed with the Giants. It was the perfect situation for him. Yeah. And I think I'm sure the Giants fans would still love to have him here, but there was a good reason why the Giants decided not to pay that money to a running back, given where they were. And it made a lot of sense for the Eagles to pay a running back that type of money, given where they were. So I think a lot of it made sense. And that kind of comes into the infrastructure that he walked into, right? And you guys still have probably now, especially after Frank Ragnow retired, I would say, Dave, the best offensive line in football. And you've had to swap a couple, one piece in and out every year, give or take. But you guys keep rolling, man. And I don't see any reason why it's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is where it starts, and it's as talented as it's been. The only question mark is right guard, and there's a kid who's been starting there in his first 2 years at times, Tyler Steen, who's the leading contender. Jeff Stoutland has built a stable of young offensive linemen. They drafted 3 more this year that they're going to groom and build for the future. But if you've got the stable offensive line and the talented offensive line, your offense is going to be really good, and you can beat teams in a lot of ways. And that's what the Eagles found out last year, that when defenses really centered their attack on A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley tore them apart. When they tried to stop Saquon, the passing game opened up. And it's because you have a dominant offensive line. And John, this goes back to the days of Andy Reid, even before that, when the Eagles drafted Trey Thomas in 1998, when Randy Moss was still on the board. It was the first time after years and years of a really bad offensive line, one that the Giants through the 80s and the 90s just feasted upon. The Eagles finally made the priority the offensive line, and they have continued that here for 25 plus years. And we see what kind of football team this is at the line of scrimmage offensively.
It's funny you mentioned that 2 years ago when the Giants had, I think they gave up, oh boy, what was it, almost 90 sacks in the year. And I had the guys at Stats look up which team allowed the most sacks in a season, and it was
Randall Cunningham.
And I think Ron Jaworski was on one of those Eagles teams that also had a ton of sacks. So you're right, those Eagles teams in the late 80s, they give up a lot of sacks.
Yeah, and it seems so unsexy, right? But when you watch games, how does your quarterback have a chance? How does your running back have a chance? You don't if you don't have an offensive line. So the Eagles have invested in the line of scrimmage, and it's paid off for them.
Jalen Hurts, did he take a noticeable jump to you last year, Dave, or is he the same guy just put in better circumstances where he was able to more take advantage of his skills? And by the way, this is not me taking anything away from Jalen Hurts. Who plays better in big spots than Jalen Hurts? I mean, he's awesome
Eagles
in big
fans
spots.
Eagles fans are in an uproar about the rankings and, how could Jalen Hurts only be the 9th-ranked quarterback in the NFL? He just won the Super Bowl. Who cares? I mean, for Jalen, who's just got that crazy competitor mentality, it probably means something. But I think where he took the biggest step forward last year was ball security. In 23, the turnovers were just killers. And then early in 24, the turnovers were very, very concerning. And then they kind of shifted the priority of the offense to running the football more, and giving Jalen a chance to kind of play with the lead, play with the defense on its heels. And he did an excellent job maintaining possession of the football. And John, really, it wasn't until the NFC Championship game where Jalen really played his best football. I mean, there was one game against the Steelers that he had a really good game, but if you think back to the NFC divisional playoff game against the Rams, he was sacked 7 times, and Eagles fans were pulling their hair out. Why is he holding on to the football so long? And in Jalen's mind, it was all about, let's not turn the football over. We've got the #1 ranked defense here. Let's make sure that we are playing ball security. So from an IQ standpoint, plays at a very, very high level. From a skills standpoint, he can clearly do it all. And he just played within his role. And I think the example here is that Jalen Hurts understands that he doesn't have to be the one putting up 325 yards and 4 touchdowns for this Eagles offense to be successful and for the Eagles to win. And if that's a blow to your ego, well, so be it. Because what he prioritizes is winning football games, and the formula worked for the Eagles last year.
I tried to come up with an interesting question about your receivers and tight end group, Dave, but it's so perfectly constructed. I don't know where I could even try to poke a hole in it. If I was to construct a group, you have A.J. Brown, the big physical run after catch, deep threat speed. Devontae Smith, the quick, fast, great hands, route running technician. Jahan Dotson, I thought was a real nice addition. Maybe there you can come up with a question or two. Dallas Goedert, still phenomenal. They work out the contract thing with him. I mean, this is just a great set of weapons. And do you have any lingering questions about this group heading into 2025?
Just depth. Who's your 4th receiver? Who's your 2nd, 3rd tight end? Questions that every team has for the most part. As far as the frontliners go, I think that the only question might be, We saw a little bit of AJ in his past with a knee issue here and there. Is that going to crop up? But otherwise, no questions from a skill standpoint. You're right, John. They perfectly complement each other. Devontae with his body control and everything he does, it's impossible to cover him one-on-one. AJ just bullies defensive backs. It's a terrific group. And Dallas Goedert, the Eagles were able to work out some things with him that there were early in the offseason speculation that he wouldn't be back. But they were able to work out a deal that he stays for 2025. And he gives them an all-around tight end who's excellent in the run game blocking, a bull in the red zone, excellent run after the catch guy. So the pieces here for this offense are just perfectly aligned once again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to defense because, Dave, you mentioned it. Top defense in football. And I think that's really what changed for the Eagles, right? How much of that had to do with Vic Fangio and everything he put into putting this defense together?
I mean, anybody who says that coaching doesn't matter in the NFL, here's an example that it does. And the Eagles were able to take a bunch of new pieces last year and put them in the right spot. They identified somebody like Zach Bond, who had a limited role edge rusher in New Orleans. They put him in an off-ball linebacker position, and he flourishes. First team All-Pro, finalist for the Defensive Player of the Year in the league, gets a huge contract. Remarkable story. Take some of these young pieces. Quinyon Mitchell, a first-round draft pick, starts from day one as the outside corner. The defense, John, one of the real turning points of this season of 2024 was when Cooper DeJean replaced Avonte Maddox at the nickel spot. And his physicality, his versatility, his athleticism, his fearlessness made the slot cornerback position, nickel spot, just extraordinary success. And so the defense really took off from there. So you've got all of these young pieces and a lot of news pieces to work in. And I just get the sense that Vic is going to keep experimenting through training camp, taking a look at what he likes, working some pieces in the regular season, and then by the middle of the season, feel really good about where this defense is. There are a lot of young, talented players that fill out the second part of the depth chart, the third team depth chart. I feel as many questions as there are about the defense. I feel better about where the defense is now than I felt last year. And a large part of it is Vic because he's just so dang good.
Yeah, and I think another big part of it, and I have to tip my cap to him, and I've been doing this way too much as to why the Eagles keep winning so many games every year, is the job that Howie Roseman has done. You guys have now successively pretty much completely transitioned from all of the key parts of what were really good Eagles defenses for a long time. Brandon Graham's not there anymore. Fletcher Cox isn't there anymore. Even go back, Malcolm Jenkins, right? He's not there anymore. Darius Slay's not there anymore. James Bradbury's not there anymore. Go down the list. All the guys that you identified with the Eagles defense through a lot of years of success, Super Bowl appearances, a Super Bowl championship, division wins, they're gone. Yet somehow, I'm not sure this group is less talented. And the way Howie's been able to restock the cupboard, mostly with draft picks, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Nakobe Dean, Sidney Brown, Kaylee Ringo. These are all draft picks. I mean, that's hard to do.
Yeah, it really is. And they've just hit on it. I mean, the success of the draft has been key to having this window that is apparently still open for the Philadelphia Eagles. When you draft well, everything falls into place. Look, there's a little bit of luck involved on the offensive side when you get a Jordan Mailata to fall in your lap and you develop him into a Pro Bowl level left tackle. But when you consistently hit at the top of the draft as the Eagles have done, and some of these mid-round, later-round picks, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. could be slated for a key role this year at linebacker. Nakobe Dean's been injured. Eagles didn't fall off a beat. He's supplemented that with some really good free agent signings. And this year, they're expecting Joshua Uche to step up in a very specified role and Azeez Ojulari to be a factor off the edge. That they don't have to come in and be stars, but they expect Nolan Smith to take a big step and Jalix Hunt to take a big step and team with Uche and with Ojulari and form that edge pass rush. I mean, it is really just a formula when your GM is on the same page as your coaching staff and knows what he's looking for, and you've got some consistency there, and you know what kind of players you need to bring in to that scheme. It really does make a big difference rather than changing schemes and changing coaches. And Howie's had the benefit of some stability here for a number of years, and his draft classes have been outstanding.
Now, I will say this. You guys are a little undersized on the edge. Now, Nolan Smith, even though he's not big, he's an excellent run defender. So I don't think people should get that wrong. But Hunt's not the biggest guy. How important is it for those guys in the middle of your defense, the Jalen Carters, the Jordan Davises, Ty Robinson, I think was a good pick out of Nebraska, Moro Jomo, to be sturdy so they can do a lot of the dirty work to let those guys on the second level flow?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, I mean, a lot of Zach Bond's success comes from playing behind a player like Jalen Carter. Look, you know how dominant defensive linemen are. You have them up in New York. You have an outstanding defensive line. And the Eagles see Jalen Carter. And for those who are not appreciative of how good Jalen Carter is, he may not put up the big numbers, but when you watch him play, he dominates the interior of the line of scrimmage, and he cleans it all up. So the linebackers are coming free to the football, and it makes a big difference. And you're right, the Eagles are not huge on the edge, but they're very large inside. They've got some versatility. They can move Carter around a little bit on the line of scrimmage. He's a dominant football player. Jordan Davis came on last year late in the playoff part of the season, enough for the Eagles to pick up his fifth-year option. Moro Ojoma was a pass rushing factor last year for the Eagles in his role. Ty Robinson comes in as a third-round draft pick. There's some other young players that were on the practice squad that the Eagles like. So again, prioritizing the line of scrimmage. The players we're talking about, for the most part, are all draft picks, and several of them are high draft picks. First-round draft picks, Smith and Davis and Carter, etc. Hunt was a high draft pick. So it's where you build your football team. The Eagles have developed those players, and it makes everything work. And now you look at the secondary and you go, hey, we can afford to put last year a rookie, Quinyon Mitchell, out there in week number one and let him develop during the course of the season, because our pass rush is reaching the quarterback. So, and vice versa. The coverage has been excellent too. So a lot of the pieces just really fit very nicely with this team, John, on defense.
Absolutely. Final question on the personnel, just in the secondary, Dave. So many young pieces back there. We kind of already mentioned a lot of the names. You mentioned the impact Cooper DeJean had. Quinyon Mitchell, I loved him coming out. The Eagles, I thought, got an absolute steal with him with where they were able to draft him. Do they think that he is like first team All-Pro type of potential given what he gave them as a rookie coming out of a small school?
Yeah, I mean, it's great point. He goes from Toledo to the NFL, day one starter, solid season, didn't give up a touchdown pass until, the waning moments of late in the game, late in the season.
Remind me, didn't he miss like most of camp with an injury too?
No, that was Cooper.
That was Cooper. Okay,
injury.
I got you.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean came in and started game 5, moved on, and was just lights out. So yeah, they do think that Quinyon has a very, very high ceiling. And then they're going to take a look at DeJean as a nickel, as an outside corner, as a safety, and see where he best fits. And that's the thing about Vic. He understands that there's some position versatility here, so he wants to see these players at all these different positions and see how it works out best for the team as the season moves along.
How quickly might we see Makuba force his way into playing time?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing about Makuba, as we are talking, unsigned, as are many of the second-round draft picks in the NFL. But Makuba is in the mix, certainly, along with Sidney Brown, Tristan McCullum at the vacated safety spot created by the trade of C.J. Gardner-Johnson to Houston.
I always ask my final question in a lot of these things. What are the expectations by the fan base? I know what your guys are. They're Super Bowl or bust, so I'm not going to waste your time with that one. How about this? How long can this window be held open? Dave, you have some older guys on offense like Lane Johnson, Dallas Goedert's he's not old, but he's on the older side. We know the way the Eagles structure their contracts. They push a lot of money into void years, which eventually do catch up at some point when guys retire or when they leave. It happens. So how long can this, I think they're still paying Jalen Hurts. I think his cap number is still like $3 million, despite the fact he's on this monster extension. So how long can this window be held open where they can keep all this talent together and still be cap compliant?
Look, a lot depends on how they develop this young talent, but John, next year in the 2026 draft, the Eagles hold 10 draft picks already and anticipate as many as 3, maybe 4 compensatory picks.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, if you're looking at that kind of draft capital already, and they've got a bunch of one-year deals here, and they've got some young players who are going to need to be signed, and there's a chance for really great roster stability here for a nice long period of window. And look, they've got a young quarterback, Tanner McKee, who's a very fine prospect. I mean, when you look down the roster, there's young players that, who knows who's going to develop. But if they do, if this draft class develops as the Eagles hope, combined with what they did last year, I mean, we're talking 3 to 5 years, I would imagine, right? Like that the Eagles are going to be right there in the thick of things.
Well, that's a fun way for Giant fans to end this episode of Big Blue Kickoff.
Hey, look, the Giants. If you got your quarterback,
That's true.
If you got it all starts right there. And so if Jackson Dart is your guy, then the Giants are back in the game in what looks to me to be a very, very good NFC East.
It should be a very challenging division. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Dave, enjoy the rest of what's now a very short off season. Players report in a week. Can't wait to see you, and we'll talk soon. All right.
John, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. That's Dave Spadaro. Thanks for joining us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. Thank all of our guests today and for joining us in the Hackensack Marine Health Podcast studio. Keep getting better. I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time.